Dhanyavad and Namaskara. Thank you, Tarun. Thank you, Indus Action. Thank you, all the people gathered there. It's nice to see you all. Sorry we are not there in person. That I'm feeling very bad about. Next time. And a very special namaskar to the two senior politicians here. Dr. Palanivel Tyagarajanji and Mahua Moitraji, though I don't quite see her on the screen yet. So the theme of from schemes to systems is a really important theme, Tarun, and thank you for flagging this, because it is now 15 years that I've been talking so much in public, boring everybody even, to talk about this continuum of Samaaj, Bazaar and Sarkaar, which has to remain as a very dynamic balance, because we need all three to work together. And there will always be pulls and pushes, but very important to realize it is a continuum. But in that continuum, I do believe that Samaaj takes the primacy, society takes the primacy, and that it should be called the first sector, because Sarkaar and Bazaar have to be the second and third sectors, I believe, behind this first sector, which is Samaaj, which is actually all of us. And civil society groups like the ones gathered here, we have to find ways to interact ever more with the political class and the business class. Because after all, no matter sometimes what people think, civil society groups are not anti-government or anti-market. They have to be pro-Samaj, pro-people. And that is their first duty, and that is their first call. And everybody, bar none, as we all know, is a citizen first. Before they are a politician, before they are a bureaucrat, before they are a CEO, before they are an employee, we are all citizens first. And last too, when we shed our day job identities and go home. So it is very important that we in the civil society group, whether we are the donors community or the frontline community in civil society organizations, that we always keep the bazaar class and the political class in mind when we are designing anything towards social welfare. So thank you for bringing up this scheme in this action, and I'm so happy that you all began yesterday. I got some feedback that was a very good session. I have very few minutes. I don't want to take too much time. I hope there'll be more occasions like this where we can be physically present to talk about this very important issue. But what is the role of Samaaj and Samaj-based organization in times like these? I want to very quickly flag one thing, because we can't talk about too many things in the 10 minutes that I have. But I have now begun to believe, after watching the kind of divisiveness everywhere, that the role of empathy has become more critical than ever, especially for us in the Samaj sector to uphold. I think that inner to outer journey, which we all strive for, which is perhaps the most difficult journey on this planet, that how the inner and the outer sense of well-being is projected through fundamental values, I think is very important. And in that, empathy for me is now seeming to hold a very important point. And here, how civil society institutions behave and what programs they create is going to become very important in the times to come. So we have to be careful that we don't create any cancel culture, as they call it in the West, no otherization. Yes, people need others. It seems it's almost about evolutionary biology. We need to have some outsider to feel strong in ourselves. But how can we understand that and yet not create further otherizations through our own words, through our own jargon, through our own ideological walls? I think it's very important today for civil society to little bit reflect on that. How can we create more shared spaces for a discourse, a civil discourse with more people? Can we create those spaces where we withhold judgment? Because I think without that, where we are headed is not looking very idealized right now. So how do we take on this very difficult task of helping ourselves and others to see ourselves as more than subjects or as more than beneficiaries, which is where that schemes to systems things also kicks in, as more than consumers? How can we help all the people we work with, and starting with ourselves, to understand ourselves as humans first in a very complex web of humanity, as citizens and as Nagriks? And what are Nagariks? What do Nagariks do, right? We as Nagariks have to be aware, we have to be alive to what is happening around us socially, economically, politically, ecologically. We have to feel we belong to a community of other citizens. And it doesn't matter if that community is just the neighborhood community in your mohalla, in your block, it could be your city, it could be your village, or even globally, because each one is important, especially if those bonds are thick and not thin. Social media has created many thin bonds, and thin bonds, it is easy to divide people very quickly. With thick bonds, it is less easy to divide people. And civil society groups play a really huge role in creating those thick bonds of action where everyone is trying to make a better society together. As citizens, we want to be curious and willing to participate in the co-creation of a society which makes our lives and other lives, and both are important, better, more abundant, and more creative. And for me, in today's 10 minutes, the second important word after empathy is going to be creativity, because creative is a very important word. Of course, I'm a writer, but even otherwise, because the apex, the zenith of human history has all been about the ability of these very frail, complex, flawed humans that we all are to generate beauty through their own talent, through their agency, through cooperation. All the beauty in the world comes from our creativity, and it's not just physical beauty as in art and sculpture, but also big new social ideas of humans trying to better themselves all the time, of social movements, of creating more equity, more inclusion, more empathy. And that creativity of becoming the best we can be and creating things to make us the best we can be is, I believe, the most important thing for Samaaj organizations to nurture. It's not easy. These are very challenging times, because in a kind of reversal of the global liberal order, which had perhaps gone stale, it had lost its relevance, and more importantly, maybe it had lost its creativity, we seem to be in a grip all over the world, and here in India too, of the shrinking of identities to narrower and narrower selves. From global to national, national to regional, regional to religional, religional to tribal, and I don't know from tribal where it ends. For the political class, and with excuses to the two senior politicians here, for the political class, this narrowing of identities can be beneficial. It can help to create voter groups. For markets, it can be beneficial. It can maybe create good segmentation to capture consumer bases. And sometimes I only half jokingly say that Bazaar has made the tyranny of choice so complex, you can't even buy rice anymore without saying what kind of rice, red rice, white rice, boiled rice, organic rice, this rice, husk rice, hull rice, whatever it is. This has become like a tyranny of choice. And it is so complex for people. And the pandemic especially has made, say, personal or family choices in the social arena so frightening that perhaps people now just want simplicity in their politics. They want to delegate and say, you know, I can't handle so much choice, and they want to maybe forget about it. It's partially a joke, but remember, this is always going to be a cop-out, and all of us must beware of this trap, because we cannot escape from co-creating the good society that we want to be in. We cannot escape from co-creating the good governance that we want. And otherwise, if we delegate this very important civic citizen action that we all have to do, what happens is a kind of a monoculture and monopoly of thought and ideas, because you have delegated, abdicated, and become apathetic, right? So that is something we all have to creatively not fall into ourselves and enable others also to become aware of. So everyone knows, it's often used cliche, monocultures versus rainforests. We want healthy, diverse ecosystems, both on the earth as well as in our minds, because they are much more sustainable for prosperity and progress. But for Samaaj, that's why for Samaaj and civil society, this shrinking to the smaller and smaller self is not beneficial, as it might be in some cases to the Bazaar class or the Sarkaar class, because it only generates more fear, more insecurity, more divisiveness, and eventually and inevitably can lead to conflict. So I think today's very important challenge ahead of us is that the role of CSOs, of all active citizen organizations that have come together here, and I salute each and every one of you. So the role of CSOs, I do truly believe, and it is our job as the donor community to support you wherever and as much as we can, is to help people see ever more of themselves in relation to the outer world, through collective action, through collective co-creation, through campaigns, projects, ideas, workshops. And eventually, we mustn't forget, they must lead to building more empathy among people, to see themselves in other people's shoes, and it might even perhaps other future generation shoes, to look out for the well-being of all. And then, of course, to generate and unleash more and more creativity to become the highest embodiment of ourselves. Is that all too idealistic in such times? Of course it is. It is very idealistic. But if together we believe in this human project, and the human project can be executed at the smallest level by ourselves, in our families, communities, and wider, but to believe in this human project, whether it takes 25 years or 100, if we believe, then we can move inexorably through our small actions, whatever they may be, all the kinds of things that all of you do and that I read about and I'm so proud of. We can move inexorably towards this goal with a feeling of hope and belief that all these actions that all of you do so well, and you hold your beliefs so well, we can believe then and have faith that all these drops of water will eventually create that ocean, that big, generous Samaaj that we all want to belong to. I could go on and on, but I won't. I'll just say we are very proud of the institutions that are gathered here today. There's a lot of work ahead for us. People are perhaps, and we don't talk about how much climate change is also dictating the politics, the culture in our societies everywhere in the globe, but that's for another time. But I would say, as they say, lage raho munna bhai, we have to keep doing our work every day, and we have to carry people with us. I wish you all great luck for the rest of the day. I will listen in for some time. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and really more power to the elbow of every single organization and all the people I saw who are gathered here today. Thank you. Dhanyavad. Namaskar. मैं तो समझती हूँ कि ये समाज का इश्यू भी है, सरकार कितना करेगी, तो जरा सोचना पड़ेगा कि एक तो अवेयरनेस सबको कि नौजवान महिलाओं की क्या जरूरतें हैं, बट ठीक है, सरकार अपनी ओर से जो कर रहा है, समाज में हम क्या करेंगे, घर घरों में क्या होना चाहिए, यही मैं समझती हूँ सिविल सोसाइटी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस का भी काम है. अभी हम 2-3 ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस को सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं जो इसके बारे में काफी काम कर रहे हैं. तो मैं यहाँ पे विषय छोड़ देती हूँ कि हम समाज के ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस में और अवेयरनेस लाने के लिए क्या कर सकते हैं. कभी कभी मैंने देखा, एजुकेशन में तो हुआ ही है, अब हेल्थ में हो रहा है, कि व्हेन द क्वालिटी ऑफ डिमांड लोगों से बढ़ता है ना, जब लोगों का डिमांड सिस्टम पे बढ़ता है, और जब समाज के ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस आपके जैसे किसी भी विषय पे एकत्र काम करना शुरू करें और लोग उनके साथ हो, तो फिर सिस्टम पे जो प्रेशर बनता है ना, वो आसानी से बनता है और उसका असर आ ही जाता है. तो हमारा काम है ये डिमांड ऊंचा करना और उसको छोड़ना नहीं. ये कला की जो बात आती है वो समाज से ही शुरू होनी है. सरकार अपनी रोल पे, अपनी जगह पे स्कूलों में कर सकती है, लेकिन हमारे हर गली में, हर मोहल्ले में, हर घर में कला के लिए पूरे विंडोज खोल के रखने हैं. और एक ही टाइप की कला नहीं, सब ऑल काइंड्स ऑफ विंड्स ऑफ कला हैव टू कम इन, बिकॉज द कल्चर थिंग इज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग. यू नीड दैट diversity of cultural expression. Through culture only we start to make meaning of what is happening in society. So allowing art to flourish, I couldn't agree more everywhere, but Samaj must take first responsibility and then tell Sarkar what to do. We have to take it first. we all have to live with multiple contradictions in all our identities. There's no real escape from it. And I feel that we wear many hats, one on top of the other, but I hope there's a hole through all those hats, which is where the values are let in. You may be a mother, you may be a wife, you may be anything else, you may be a leader in society. Politicians have the most difficult role, so hats off to them. But everybody else, we wear many, many roles, and sometimes they are in conflict. And we should be able to hold those conflicts with a very sound values base. And that's where we have to keep questioning ourselves. What do I believe in? And that's what connects all these different caps that we wear of identities. And we have to keep looking to that. And that's part of that inner to outer journey that I was talking about earlier. That's all I can say. Yes, there can be cognitive dissonance. As Mahuaji said, we have to do the best we can for the most amount of time that we can when those conflicts arise. We have to hold those conflicts gracefully and with our values. I think in the pandemic, there were several. Also in the health sector, you have seen whether it was the polio vaccination scheme in India, I think Samaaj, Sarkaar and Bazaar together. And in my experience of 30 years in this space now, I think in education, we have to admit that Samaaj, Sarkaar, Bazaar have come together. And both private solutions, public solutions, and societal leadership has brought us to where finally, I mean, the pandemic was a huge setback, but we have no more children, at least till 2020, we had no more children out of school. I mean, we were now focusing on learning outcomes. Could not have happened without all three sectors coming together. Few more examples are there, but I think in climate change, we desperately need to see that unity. And there are plenty of opportunities, and I really hope we can focus on bridging these sectors. And that's a role some of us have to play. And that's going to be very important. Has been done, can be done, and must be done.